Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Southern. I'm a professor of child health in Liverpool, and I'm the current director of the ECFS Standards of Care Committee. I'm joined today by Andrea.
Hello, everybody, and I'm very happy to be here with you, and welcome to all the attendants. I'm Andrea Gramegna, I work in Milano. My background is most on adult CF and bronchiectasis, and part of the task force for these guidelines with a special attention to this fourth document.
And I'm also joined by Elise.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Elise Lammertijn. I'm the head of research for CF Europe. So CF Europe is the overarching European patients organization, so the Federation of National and Regional Patients Organizations in Europe. And I'm also the scientific officer for the Belgian patient organization.
Thank you, Elise. And we're hoping to be joined by Oren as well. Oren has had some difficulty connecting at the moment, but when he joins, he'll introduce himself. And Oren is a contributor to this paper. So today this is the final webinar in this series of 4, and we're going to be reviewing the 4th paper in the series, which was focused on planning for a longer life. And obviously by the title, that is something that we should really be celebrating, that the community has come this far, that we are in a position to be doing this. But we'll speak in a moment around the ethos of the paper. I just wanted to talk a little bit about this webinar briefly and about some of the methodological approaches to this work. As many of you will have listened to the webinars in the past, and you'll know that this is really what we're doing is reflecting on these papers. We're considering the most important information in the papers and the key messages from the papers. So really listening to these webinars we hope you'll find interesting and useful and enjoyable. But really this is no substitute for reading the papers, and we would strongly recommend to you reading the papers. The papers were put together by the Standards of Care Committee. We had a core committee who put the framework of all the papers together, and we identified contributors, authors to each section, and we have to say that they did an absolutely tremendous job. We're very grateful to them because they did it very quickly and in a very timely way. They provided us with superb sections which we all reviewed, so there was a good deal of peer review, and they also provided us with the statements that we've talked about before with the previous papers, and those statements are items that you as healthcare professionals or individuals with CF or with a family member with CF, you should review those statements and say, how do these relate to my life? And is this something I can talk to my CF team or my patients about? Are we achieving these goals as a really as a bare minimum in our life? Are we moving towards this? So it's been overall a tremendous piece of work to do, and it's nice to go through this series, and it's nice to review the final paper today. Andrea, you were very keen to sort of have a leading role in this paper. You were very excited about it. Did you why was that? What was it that?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I think that this document is quite special and is something that we as a community should be proud of. It's something new, and I think we can understand it by reading the first statement, that is that we as CF team should support people with CF through their life journey. And this approach is something that makes this statement, this document, not a technical document, but something more wider and open to everybody in the CF community. I think it's also important to read this document in 2 different ways. We have a first approach talking about some physiological aspects of growing older and engaging with life and navigating all life issues of people with CF. And this is a good approach from an individual point of view. But then we have also a second part of the document that is quite important and, in my view, very, very new. That is to look at people with CF within a community, the CF community, first of all, and so relations with research. That is a very important topic. I hope we will spend a few words about that in the later webinar.
Yeah.
And then also CF in a worldwide community. And again, there is another very important section in this document, in my view, that is exploring global inequities of CF care across the world. And so we have a document that is both individual and global about we as a community and the next phase, the future perspectives of CF care.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and we'll try and cover those. I mean, we have got a lot to get through in the next hour, but we'll do our very best. That was perfect timing, Oren, coming in there as Andrea mentioned the CF community. But Oren, I'm glad you have been able to join us. Would you be kind enough to introduce yourself to the audience? Yep.
Yes, for sure. My name is Oren Perlsman. I'm a CF patient. I had a lung transplant about 8 years ago. And I'm also a health economist, so I have a different interest between my occupation and my disease.
Oren, thanks ever so much for joining us today, and we look forward to some of your comments on this paper later on, a paper that you contributed to. But before we come to that, I've forgotten so we decided for each of these papers we would outline 3 key messages, and I was supposed to read those out and I forgot. So I'm going to read them out now, but Helen will put these into the chat. We probably won't have time to revisit them later on. So these were the 3 key messages that we want people to think about from this webinar. The first message is that the CF journey, including planning for a family, is unique, and the CF team should support people with CF through each stage. We'll come a bit more into that in detail. The second key message is that people with CF are well informed and cognizant of the impact of inequalities on their condition, as well as the impact of delivering high quality healthcare on the planet. CF teams should be aware of these issues, tackle them individually and in partnership with people with CF, addressing policymakers and the pharmaceutical industry. There's a lot in that statement, a lot to unpick, and we'll go into that later on. And then finally, the final key message, and this is one that is really exciting for me because I've seen this change over the last 10, maybe 15 years in the world of CF, and it's really excited me, is that research for people with CF should be driven by people with CF and supported by people with CF at every stage. And that's been a tremendous move forward. And we said, Oren, before you had a chance to join us, we said, in a way, the fact that we have written this paper is to some degree a celebration of the progress that's being made in the field, and that's good, and we should celebrate it. And it's not just down to modulators. There's many things: newborn screening, various therapies, pancreatic enzymes. All these things have contributed to the improvement that people with CF have seen in their well-being and their quality of life and their length of life. But Elise really I bring Elise in now. Elise has a key role within CF Europe, which is the community vessel. No, sorry, that's the wrong word, Elise. Community sort of organization for people with CF across Europe. And you were really very fundamental. You and your colleagues were fundamental in putting together the framework of this paper. But I think we, Elise, need to keep our feet on the ground, don't we?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as many of you have said, there's a lot to celebrate, and I think we should take this opportunity to celebrate because we have achieved as a community so many wonderful things over the past decades. But of course, there's still a lot to keep in mind. I mean, we have inequities on a patient level, on a person level, just speaking of poverty, for instance, and which effect this can have on people's health. But also on a community level, when we look to access to specific types of care, and I'm not only talking about CFTR modulators here, but also things that we consider basic, like inhaled antibiotics. For some people and in some countries, people just don't have access to that. And I think also here we have to really look and see the difference between when we look to modulators, to eligibility and access. There's now a rich ground of evidence saying that eligibility to modulators is far beyond what we thought that was possible and what is actually authorized in Europe. But access there really lags behind for these people with rare mutations. And also in countries, for instance, in the eastern part of Europe, people with F508 mutations don't have access to modulators yet. So yes, we really should celebrate, but we should keep on fighting for access to basic and revolutionary drugs in Europe and around the globe.
Thank you very much, Elise, and we'll touch on some of those topics as we go through the webinar. But we'll go through section by section as we tend to. And the first section, Oren, is on navigating life, which was quite a big ask, really, and some of it was pretty related to stuff that we're, as a CF community, we're pretty engaged with and we're used to around navigating the early years of life, and then issues around school and further education, and also transitioning into adult life. But I think there were sections in there on employment, insurance options, and then considering retirement. These are new issues for people with CF, aren't they? And I thought those sections were beautifully written and very pertinent.
Yes, my parents, when I was born, was told that I wouldn't survive the age of 12, and now my firstborn son is 12, so it's a big difference.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, it's a new disease now with all the Trikafta and all the other treatments. The longevity of the patient with cystic fibrosis is no longer limited by the disease, but with other side effects like diabetes and a new disease that come along with the once you get older with the disease. And I'm 40 and I'm suffering from partly geriatric disease. So it's a big difference from having a child disease to a adult disease. It does concern new aspects of life, like as you said, pension, health insurance, and so on. It's trying to be more like a normal person, if I can say, and not just a patient with a limited time span. You have to change your perspective and think about the future, which is it wasn't common in the past.
A common theme of all these webinars, Oren, has been there is no normality in the world. But yeah, I know what you mean, and it's quite interesting for many people with CF. Their family around them is really, really important and is a support structure. But actually now we may get to the point where some adults with CF are actually looking after their parents who have issues of growing older and some of the issues around that. And then we will talk about this a bit later on, Andrea, won't we? But actually themselves might be experiencing some of the just standard issues of growing older, and we'll come on to that in a little bit. I really like, and this is jumping forward a little bit, but we'll come back to plan. But the raising children and grandchildren section was very nice, and the nod to the fact that there will be people with CF who will be raising grandchildren, which in my I have no experience of grandchildren, but I hope to maybe one day. But in my knowledge, being a grandparent is much easier than being a parent. So.
I can always return the kids to the parents.
Yes. And at the end of the section on navigating through life, there's a lovely section on respecting values and beliefs, which I feel is something that in society, particularly at this point in time, is something that we really need to, as a community, do, and we need to look at individuals and be flexible around their beliefs, and those beliefs might be around medicinal products that they have, or around certain diets, or the way they want to live their life and the way they want their end of life care to be. So that was a lovely section as well. And that brings us nicely on to the next section, which is around planning a family. And I guess planning a family is a part of many people's lives, but for people with CF, it needs good consideration, Andrea, and the impact of the introduction of modulator therapy, particularly effective modulator therapy for people with CF, was really quite dramatic in this regard. Sorry, you're on mute, Andrea. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I find that it's part of a living independently that is a powerful expression, a powerful wording that we use in this first session. And planning a family is part of that, in the sense that we were used to walk along with people with CF planning their families, a lot of consultations, a lot of talking about fertility and supporting pregnancy for women with CF. And then modulators arrived. That was quite unexpected, because it had a huge impact on fertility for women with CF, and all the issues then regarding the exposures of these new modulators to fetus. And I think that this document helps a lot regarding this issue, because we have incorporated in this document also the previous guidelines on the use of CFTR modulators, and one part of them was also regarding possible implications during pregnancy. And in my daily clinics, I find that this is a big question mark, and women with CF engaging pregnancy and want to speak a lot about that. I had a lot of questions about that, and the guidelines are really helpful. The standards are really helpful in helping the CF team in providing orientations and answers. So this is one of the main aspects, I think, that are discussed in this first session on living independently and planning for a longer life.
I think to some degree, Andrea, the CF community and healthcare professionals were somewhat caught out by the impact of modulator therapy and the sudden, frankly, explosion that we had in people with CF who became pregnant, and that was to some degree not ideal, because if you have an unplanned pregnancy, the risks are slightly higher. So it's much better to be aware and to be planning for a pregnancy. But it's something, again, that we should celebrate. The birth of these wonderful little babies and the joy that brings. There is work going on, and there still needs to be more work around the impact of these drugs on the fetus, the unborn baby, and there is work going on in that area, quite tantalizing, really, suggesting that actually if the mother chooses to continue on the the modulator therapy, and that's a decision that the mother needs to make in partnership with the CF team, because it's not licensed to be used during pregnancy, then the baby will be exposed to significant levels of the modulator across the placenta, and also if the mother chooses to breastfeed, then the baby will be exposed to modulators through the breast milk as well, and this is something that we're monitoring and keeping a close eye on, and there are anecdotal cases that we don't go into around the impact of the modulators on possibly babies who have cystic fibrosis, but that was beyond the remit of this paper, and we had alluded to that in a previous paper, as you said. But I think that overall the section on planning for a family sort of outlines the responsibilities that we as CF teams need to have with our young CF patients and older CF patients with regard to making them aware of these issues and helping them to do that planning. Elise.
Yeah, what I want to say is that I also like that in this paper it is stressed that it is important to also have this conversation during the transitioning already from a younger age, also on all things concerning sexuality, that it is important to have this as a step-by-step conversation between the doctor and the adolescent, and then later the adult with CF, so that it doesn't come as something that people didn't know or as a shock. I mean, I've heard these stories of men that didn't know that they were not fertile. So I like that this paper also stresses that this should be part of a continuous conversation between the team and the person with CF.
Doing that in a sensitive way and in partnership with the family. So letting the parents know that this is a discussion that you're going to have with their son, because sometimes they may want to have that discussion before you do. Yeah. And I think that's very reasonable. Yeah. So there's a lot of really good stuff in there. Oren, did that bring back memories to you, that section, or yeah?
Yes, the entire way of life is changing. And I don't have something very smart to say that isn't written in the essay already, but yeah, the entire community is very important, and the fact that you have to the doctors must see you as part of the treatment and not only as a patient is very crucial to the success.
What did you think about the comments around the fact that when you become a parent, you become very preoccupied with looking after your infant, your child, your baby, and then you may not be focusing as much on your own care needs during that period? Did you think that was fair, or?
Yes, it's true, because I remember when my son was ill, I used to stay with him at home, and after the lung transplant, it's no more possible, because it might infect me with some other infections. So it does affect you, the way you treat yourself and the way you treat your infants.
Yes, and this is a common theme, isn't it? That life is complicated for everybody. Everybody's life is complicated, but for CF, there's some specific characteristic issues, many around cross-infection, many around other issues, which make the CF life, gives it an added complexity that we need to be aware of, we need to be sensitive to, and we need to outline to the families that this is how it is, and we can support you through this, and people support themselves. So we move on to the next section, which is really interesting to me. I'm a pediatrician, as you know, but now the things that we're doing in the childhood years, we're looking at the impact that they're going to have on our patient population as they're 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, going into their old age. So it's really fascinating. And Andrea, from your perspective, what were the key messages in this section?
Yes, this session is titled Growing Older with CF, and it founded on the process of the changing of CF demographic. This was not this was already well documented even before the arrival of the new modulators, but then of course highly effective modulators accelerated this process. And so in this part of the document we wanted to arise some discussion around the fact that people with CF are becoming more physiologically similar to the general population from one point of view. And so we should be able to forecast and manage specific health issues arising with older age, as metabolic issues, cardiovascular disease, cancer issues that are very common in the later in people, in older people. And then again, we also spend some words around some specific aspects of growing older that may be more specific to the CF population, as in the case of pelvic health or CF-associated arthritis, or all the discussion around menopause and this part of the women health. And so this section, in my view, it has to be celebrated because it's something that is quite pioneeristic, quite new. I could not remember a lot of talking about growing older with CF in the previous standards. But of course, this is not well established. It's something that we are exploring now, and but we are in this very peculiar situation, in a very special timing, that we can try to forecast, and so to work to anticipate, to work from a prevention point of view.
Absolutely, it's a recognition, isn't it? And the section on pelvic health and then the section on menopause. I mean, again, these are issues that everybody can face in their lives, including men. But for people with cystic fibrosis, there are particular issues around it, which are outlined very, very nicely in those sections. And this is an area that the CF team can provide good support, because these are topics that, unless specifically inquired about during a clinic consultation, may not arise, and actually are really important to the young and older people with cystic fibrosis. The musculoskeletal section, we wondered about putting this in this paper, and we felt it did relate more to the improving outlook, the fact that people with CF are growing older, but we did wonder about putting it into paper 3, recognizing specific and addressing specific CF issues. But I think it sits really nicely in here, Andrea.
Yeah, I think it's part of this discussion. So we focus on problems that may occur at every age during the CF life, but in this section is part of this general improvement of outcomes, growing older, and so arising some new aspects that needs to be better focused also during our consultations. And this is also a call to produce better data and to report to the community in order to be aware of the real prevalence and impact of these aspects in the life of our of people with CF.
Yeah, we'll come back to data later on in the talk. Elise?
I wanted to add that I also love how the CF community is now actually learning along with the general community, for instance, on things like menopause. I mean, for a lot of women from the general population, they go to their doctors with a myriad of symptoms, and the doctor also doesn't mention menopause because so little is known still about this time in the life of a woman. And in a way, the CF community is now learning together with everyone else on menopause. I mean, there are probably some CF specific things like an earlier menopause, but I think we're really making up for time we lost in the past, and that's also something nice to see.
But it's really important, isn't it? And another key theme, Elise, that people with CF shouldn't miss out on things because they have CF. They shouldn't miss out on good screening, good primary care. They should those public health initiatives should be available to them as individuals. And you know, and you won't mind me saying this, Andrea, but you're not probably an expert on bowel cancer, or you're becoming an expert, but those kind of problems of older age, prostate cancer, for example, or whatever, that people with CF should not miss out on that because they're in a CF clinic. They don't see their GP possibly, but they should have they should have a relationship with their GP.
Yes, this puts the light on the need to rethink probably a lot of things that we maybe missed in the last years, as the relation between individual with CF and their GP, as you said, or including in the CF team new specialists that may be that we may consult in case of new health issues. And so probably this is something that I really appreciate about this document. It is radicated on previous experience and evidence, but it's also open to new perspectives. And so I hope this will read very wider and maybe also discussed and cited because it may help community discussion around reshaping some aspects in this regarding this population.
Absolutely. So we'll move on now to the next section, which is on how inequalities for the individual and inequities globally have impacted on people with CF, and we've had a lot of positive feedback about these two sections, and I think they're really tremendously put together, and it's really fascinating to think that essentially cystic fibrosis has been well recognized in countries that have a high prevalence of the variant F508del, Delta F508, which is a tremendously common variant or mutation. But in other populations where F508del is not a common variant, then often there is a little consideration of cystic fibrosis. And if you think of a country like, well, India is now the most populous country in the world, but in India there are over 20 million babies are born a year, and even if the incidence of cystic fibrosis in India is very low because of the low prevalence of F508del, there's still going to be several hundred babies born every year in India with cystic fibrosis that are not really being picked up on and recognized. And this section sort of outlines some of the barriers that people are facing in countries with low prevalence and sometimes low resources to manage CF, the need to support leaders in those areas, the need to sort of develop services. And I have to say the CF Society, the European CF Society and CF Europe has done a tremendous amount of work over the past 10 years in trying to branch out with both education, but also with mentorship around sort of trying to address that issue. It's a massive issue though, and it will be really interesting to see how it pans out over the next 20 years. Elise, did you have something to say on that topic?
Yeah, I think awareness raising is, of course, extremely important in this regard. I think for some countries it's a combination of unawareness about this disease, but also lack of resources. To set up a newborn screening program, for instance, is very expensive. And if there then isn't any awareness amongst policymakers, then it becomes really difficult. Of course, because of globalization, I think this disease becomes much more known. I think also the fact that at the ECFS conference, a lot of people from around the globe, not only Europe, are present is a very good sign. But yes, there's definitely work to be done. That's true.
We certainly need to overcome this barrier of we don't have cystic fibrosis in our country, and that's quite a significant thing to achieve, and that's part of the pathway to having better, higher quality global care for people with CF. And then we move on to the next section, which is somewhat I don't know quite the right word, sort of heartbreaking for me, in that we still see this quite stubborn health gap, so health inequality gap between people from very well-resourced backgrounds and people from less well-resourced backgrounds, people in poverty. And to be in poverty with any chronic condition, but cystic fibrosis leads to poorer outcomes for those people. And I guess people say, well, that's a societal thing. But I think we're now seeing within the CF community that that's something that we as a community should be addressing, and should be, and we as healthcare professionals should be addressing. And this is a really nice section written by Lydia from CF Europe, but also Michael and David, who have done a tremendous amount of research on this section. And I think it outlines things. It kind of alludes to some societal solutions to these problems, but actually there's a lot of responsibility as well for us as a community, us as healthcare professionals, and for the associations around Europe. And I know this has become a big focus for associations, not just in Europe, but also the CF Foundation, around addressing these health inequalities, Elise, and that's been a tremendous piece of work.
I think it also highlights the importance of having a social worker in the CF team, because people from specific socioeconomic backgrounds often also don't have the knowledge to go to certain instances in the community to get help. There's lack of knowledge where to find proper help, because in many cases help is available. But I think it's really important that people are guided towards that help, and it's also a task for patient organizations. I know that some patient organizations around Europe are also financially supporting people with CF, because in many countries that have a good social security system, there are still things that need to be paid out of pocket, which is not possible for some people. So also there, in terms of lobbying, we can really make some improvements still.
And often it's difficult for people in a situation that's not ideal to engage with research, to engage with sort of driving the field forward, and that's something that we should be trying to address.
Yes, because I think sometimes to get in a clinical trial, it's known that this is sometimes really up to the discretion of the physician that is seeing that person with CF. But sometimes when you live in a certain situation, you might not be so good with your medication, not taking it in time, not really adhering, and then your physician might be less inclined to put you in a clinical trial, and that's how this cycle continues, of course. So I think also here it's so important that the team really knows the person and also knows the background and see what is playing there in this individual situation.
So, and if I may add, from a personal point of view, I've learned a lot from this session, from this section of the document. I think it's so important to have such a strong statement about taking care and try to find a better strategy in order to identify those subgroups of individuals that may be marginalized during our daily care, even in the best, most in-sourced centers. And so again, this is one of the strengths of the document, in my view.
Absolutely, absolutely. Really strong sections. And as I say, we've already had very, very, very good feedback around these sections. And that takes us nicely to our next section. And this really came out of CF Europe Police and people with CF saying that really they wanted not to be considered as individuals, but as a community, and the impact of that community on the global planet, on the planet around them. And Oren, you were an author on the next section together with Lydia and Sarah and Tom, who are doctors who are very committed to sort of considering our impact on the environment. And I found this section and the way you put it together was really, really interesting. So first of all, the impact of how the planet is changing on people with CF and the potential risks associated with that on air quality and climate particularly. And then a reflection on healthcare impacts on the planet, and the healthcare industry is massive in the world, isn't it, Oren? And you, as with your other hat as a health economist, will know this very well. And I thought it was a lovely section, Oren, that you put together, and maybe you could reflect on it. And yeah.
Yes, for sure. Yes, the environment is a very key aspect of the cystic fibrosis life, because you're both impacted by air pollution and other pollution in the area, and you both a polluter, since you are creating a mass amount of packages of medicines. Each week I find myself throwing to the recycle bin a lot of packages. So the more that we can help to lower the footprint on the environment, it will be better both for the environment and both for us.
I think all humans are polluters, though, Oren, and I think that was a really nice message from this section, is that actually, there needs to be an awareness that you need to have quality of care, and quality of care does involve some disposables, some plastics, but actually it is the responsibility of the healthcare industry and the governments and the pharmaceutical industry to really be aware of this and to do everything they can do. And there are a lot of things that they can do to improve the situation with regard to the impact of healthcare on the planet. And I thought that was really nice, actually. And I think that's the first time that's ever been written about any condition anywhere. So congratulations. It's really innovative and it's really powerful. And I think to have it in a guideline to say, look, you as policymakers, as healthcare providers, as pharmaceutical industry, you need to do your bit to make sure that you are being as environmentally sensitive as you are in all your processes and so forth. And it's not really down to the individual person with cystic fibrosis. They need to have their high quality care, and that care should not be compromised, I guess, by not using plastic nebules or whatever, because they're worried about the impact on the environment. It's a really tricky balance, isn't it, Oren, in achieving that in life, I guess.
Yes, the more we go into the digital solutions, we can help to mitigate the damages, but there is still a long way to go.
And then the healthcare team. So your CF team, they need to be talking about this all the time and talking about how they travel to work, how they interact, how they use therapies, and and also global conference attendance is something that we should be thinking about. And I think it's really important. It's important that we go to conferences, that we look each other in the eyes, and that we talk to each other. At least we do this. We go to the European CF conference. I think that's really important. But actually, we all need to be thinking about how much we're doing this and what the impact is and whether there's alternatives. I think virtual, like this webinar is out there virtually, and that's a good step forward. But it can't replace face-to-face meetings. Then nothing could replace sitting down with peers and with colleagues and talking about new ideas, new innovations, moving things forward. So there's a balance in life, isn't there? And I think we need to be aware of that. I was really proud of this section. I thought as a community we should be really proud of it, Oren, that it's putting something on the table that we should think about and consider. And Elise, thank you and your team for your contribution to it as well. Lydia was very keen.
I'll extend your thanks to Lydia.
Yeah. So as we move towards the end, we're going to talk about the final section, which some people find a bit dry, but to me it's the most exciting bit. I am obviously a bit biased because I'm kind of a researcher, but I'm excited by this, Elise, because there's been a sea change, and we talked about this at the beginning, but the sea change has been dramatic, and it's come from a number of different areas. There was obviously the James Lind Alliance initiative in the UK, and that was across Europe and the US, but there's also been other initiatives in Europe. CF Europe have looked at priority setting. So what research questions are people with CF asking? What are the priorities to them in their lives? What do they want to see happen moving forward? And I think that's been absolutely fabulous, Elise, and it was great to have a section in here on that. Yeah.
You know, there's a sentence, nothing about us without us, meaning that people really want to have a voice in the research that is being done around this disease that they have. So people with CF really have this lived experience. They know what is important to investigate. So they should definitely have a voice in this. And I think the James Lind Alliance initiative, together with the UK CF Trust, has been so important for this, because I think it was the first time that it has been done on such a in such a scientifically sound way, to discover these research priorities. And I think it's really nice that they did a repeat exercise. I think it was 2 years ago now, because everyone could feel that people's lives had changed so much. So also the things that they prioritized for research must have changed. And indeed, you see that. Sorry.
Well, that's really interesting, Elise, because the initial, well, I just to mention that for people that might not be aware, but the James Lind Alliance, it basically set the top 10 research priorities for people with CF. There were many others, but the headline was the top 10 research priorities, and one of them led to me working with a team who are looking at treatment burden, and we're running a study called CF Storm. But then they repeated the exercise after patients have been on, many patients had had access to triple modulator therapy, and there was a change in the nuance was quite interesting. So treatment burden, although it was still in the top 10, went down the list because people were feeling in a very different place with the modulator therapy. So it's important to listen, but it's important to continue listening, isn't it? Year on year on year, because actually the world is changing, and the world for people with CF is changing.
And in a way, treatment burden is still very much alive in the heads of people, because
but not the top priority anymore.
No, but because of CFTR modulators, people are thinking about things like physiotherapy and inhaled antibiotics and stuff like that. Like, can we diminish it? Can we get rid of it? So,
well, as we've said on previous podcasts, we need a whole new evidence base for all these old-fashioned, if you like, therapies that we've had for many years and decades.
So therapies are still very important. How can we optimize therapies? How can we make it most efficient? What should we keep? What don't we have to keep? So that's still something that is very much in the heads of people. But of course, you see that in these renewed priorities, there's also place now for new topics.
And also a shift in the engagement with people with CF and their families in the research. So I really don't like it when you have a tokenistic sort of stakeholder engagement. So you put together your research team and you think, oh, we'll get somebody with CF in just to sort of tick that box, but it should be more than that. What the people with CF should really be driving not only the research questions, but how the research trial runs, how it runs, what we look for, what are the key outcomes that we are interested in changing in our lives, and I can see that that's happening. And it's really heartening to see that happening, Oren, to see people with CF sort of involved in every stage of research, putting together the trial, what we call the trial protocol, the way the trial is run, and how we collect the data and how it's analyzed.
And I have a thought about that. I think that it's important to talk about this because we should work on the best method in order to explore patient priorities in driving clinical research, in order not to have priorities of a tiny minority be overshadowed by what the majority thinks at that moment. Because now we have a situation with different groups walking at different paces, and so we should be very careful about exploring priorities according to, probably, this is my thought, geographical setting or an eligibility to highly effective modulators, so on.
That is really pertinent, Andrea, because you can be slightly at risk, Oren, of developing patient professionals who then become detached from actually the CF community. They're more representing sort of trials managers and researchers rather than actually the CF community. It's a difficult balance to get, isn't it, in life?
Yeah, I see it a lot working with the patient organization as an economist. There's a certain time that the patient advocate becomes more attached to the researcher or the doctor and less to the patient. You have to keep in touch with the base.
Yes, keep in touch with the base. Yeah.
And it's a difficult balance, isn't it? With CF Europe, we have our community advisory board that talks to pharmaceutical companies, and those are, in fact, expert patients or expert parents, because they have this experience with talking to pharmaceutical companies and sponsors and also academic researchers. But we keep telling that it's so important to go back to their community and
Yes.
feel the temperature there.
And sometimes they want the training helps them to feel more confident in their role, because it's quite intimidating to go into a room of professors and tell them what to do. And I've had that myself, and I try not to be intimidating, but by having that training, you can give people the confidence to go in and say, no, actually, we don't want to do blood tests every 2 days because it's too much. Or I'm just giving a glib example, but yeah, fascinating. It's really fascinating, and as I say, it's an area that I think has moved forward over the last 10 years tremendously, and I hope that direction of travel continues. And that brings us to our last section, which is a personal favorite of mine and very important, because I am a massive fan of registries. I feel that they are key. They're elemental in driving forward the quality of CF care across the globe. And one of the biggest, most heartening things to me is to see not only a very functional registry in my own country, in the UK, but across Europe. The European registry has expanded, is tremendously functional, and for various reasons has become stronger and stronger and stronger. And we also have really very established and really excellent registries in other parts of the world. And I feel that the potential for having, I think, Oren, you need data. You need data to make, and you need accurate data as well to be able to go to policymakers, to be able to change things, to make things better. But I think registries have many other potential uses and roles that they can play within the CF community. I'm sure you agree, Oren, as a health economist.
Yeah, of course, you can't do anything without a proper registry, because most of the time you find the health suppliers and actually everybody wants to keep his data for himself, and unless you have a good registry, preferably a national registry, you can't take any proper risk, like giving new treatments or new medicines to the population, because you don't know how much money you'll need, and this is a great risk. We talked a bit before about inequation in healthcare. This is one of the main factors that implicate on that.
And it's very interesting you talking there, Oren, around people keep their data for themselves. And you spoke to me before, and this is now going back to a different webinar that we did when we were talking about moving towards virtual care and so on. But the general feeling within the CF community that actually we're putting data in all the time, and we want these data to be pertinent to us as individuals, and not just to some research team who are doing something that you kind of describe some app fatigue, and I kind of hear that quite regularly going around, and people want to see what this means to them and how it's going to drive forward them and their community. So that's really interesting. I think we could probably talk all afternoon. It's been tremendously enjoyable. Thanks again to Elise and Oren and Andrea for your contribution to this paper, which was enormous, but also for joining me this afternoon, to do this webinar. As I've said before, these are available, and I think Helen, have you put the link in the chat, so you can actually go on a YouTube clip and you can listen to this as an audio product. So, like if you like a podcast, I guess, and that you can listen to that whilst you're walking your dog or whatever you want to do. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been interesting for you, and what we've reflected on with regard to this paper, which I think is an absolutely tremendous paper. Very proud to have been involved in it, and thank you all again for joining me today. Elise, do you have any closing comments?
It was a great journey to be on the core committee of the Standards of Care papers. I've learned so much, and I think this is what the community needed. I also just want to mention that we have a terrific summary, a lay summary.
Yes. Yeah.
That's also on the site of Journal of CF and on the ECFS website. Fiona Dunleavy did a great job in summarizing.
Well, you did yeah.
And I also wanted to mention that some of my colleagues from European patient organizations will start translating the summary, because we think it's so important that the people themselves can really read what the standards are, can go into conversation with their team, and also have these new insights.
If you email us, we can send you a PDF of the lay summary if you're struggling to find it. Sometimes the CF research things are a bit tricky to find. Andrea, any final quick words?
Yes, just to say that please read this document and try to share and discuss within your centers, because my humble opinion is that it contains a lot of food for thoughts. And again, lay summary can be really a great strategy in order to disseminate to a wider public. Also, because I think it's the best document to be read by the whole community, because it's really informative, and also it contains a lot of perspective of the future ages in CF care.
Super, Andrea. And Oren, any final words?
It was very challenging and very insightful to think about your daily life in different manners, because you don't think about it in your day-to-day life.
So if we've done nothing else, we've made people think, which is always good, isn't it? Yeah.
It's
Take
an
care,
interesting
everyone.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
the podcast. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.